Hello, and welcome to episode 34 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I am your co-host, Sam Marvin, here with my co-host, Sean Brigg. Sean, how you doing?
I'm great, especially now that you are fully bought into Andor, and your episode 1 negative reactions are entirely in the past.
100% change in opinion toward the show of Andor. So happy that we are at this point. So this episode of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things, we are going to talk about episodes 8, 9, and 10 in the Disney Plus series Andor. I'm pulling up the episode summaries now. Is there any fantasy news, Sean, that you want to discuss before we get into the meat of the Andor series? Did anything happen in the world of fantasy that we...
Not off the top of my head. Is there something I should know?
I don't know. I'm trying to rack my brain. There was a little bit tidbits with the writer's strike, kind of some of the stuff that's coming out. Oh, I did see a follow-up to the story we talked about with the animal cruelty complaints. Apparently a horse did die on set of the Rings of Power, so our relatively flippant conversation about flies and bees and ants. Okay, a horse died. That is sad. I think PETA called on them to use CGI horses, which I don't think that would go very well. I don't think that would look very good.
A much better track record than Kentucky Derby.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It's been a bad week for horses. Yeah, a bad 2 weeks for horses.
I think we talked about it last week, but yeah, there's like 7 or 8 horses died at the Kentucky Derby. So I think PETA's got bigger issues.
Yeah, worry about the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, let's stop horse racing instead of using horses in movies.
Have you ever watched a horse race, either on TV or in person?
Not in person, definitely not. I think the only time that I actually turned on the TV to watch a horse race was, oh God, it's probably like 10 years ago now. There was a horse that almost did the Triple Crown, and I think I watched the 3rd race to see if the horse would win the Triple Crown.
Okay.
But otherwise, yeah, I could give a shit. I honestly do not care about horse racing.
Everybody gets all up in, I don't want to say up in arms, but everybody gets all excited for the Kentucky Derby. And it's like 24 hours of hype for 5 minutes of horses running around in a circle.
Oh God, if that. I feel like it's more like 2
even
minutes.
Less. Yeah. Okay. So even less. The one cool thing about horse racing is when the horse named Nyquist won the Kentucky Derby. And for those of you who don't know,
the people of Detroit, yeah.
Sean and I are both Red Wings fans, and Gustav Nyquist was I don't want to say long time, but he was a fixture for several years. And there was a horse breeder or horse owner who named a horse after him, and that horse went on to win the Kentucky Derby. All right, well, let's jump into our discussion of episode 8 of the show Andor. I will read off the Wikipedia summary. So spoilers for those who have not watched, but we highly recommend that you watch Andor. So yeah, episode 8.
So I'll say,
yep,
the show is kind of split up into different arcs. We had the very beginning was like 2 episodes of just kind of introduction, backstory. Then we get into like a heist arc, like a 3-episode arc. And the most recent plot line was like a 3-episode prison arc. So again, this follows mostly Andor. There's a lot of other subplots going on right now, but this is the 3-episode prison arc of Andor.
It begins with episode 8, which is titled Narkina 5. Cassian is brought to a prison surrounded by water on Narkina 5, where he spends every day working in monotonous heavy industry with hundreds of other prisoners. Vel and Cinta travel to Ferrix to search for him. When Marva falls ill, Bix attempts to contact Luthen about Cassian's whereabouts, but Luthen, worried about being exposed to anyone monitoring communications, does not answer. He then leaves Coruscant to meet with Saw Gerrera. Rael attempts to hire Gerrera's rebel cell to act as air support for a raid on an Imperial power station at Spellhouse, organized by Anton Krieger, but is turned away. Daedra Miro questions Cyril Karn about his experiences on Ferrix, but declines his offer to help with her investigation. She leads a unit to Ferrix herself, where she apprehends Bix. So, Sean, what did you think of episode 8?
Yeah, there were a couple things in this. We get the first scene of Andor going up to the prison, and that first moment of how dark the Empire can get when the prison guards teach them how the floors are electrocuted. And the prison guard in particular that does this, he shocks them all and then has this very intense, creepy smirk on his face while he's doing it. And it shows that level of sociopath that they are using and employing as the Empire. And you made a good comment before we started recording about just those kind of tendencies in real life, about authoritarian governments and things like that. And I mean, we know Star Wars is based off of Nazi Germany, so it tracks that we would get those lines that we could connect with this. But yeah just really, really, really good.
And that is almost I guess that is really a theme of, if not the whole season, definitely these 3 episodes that we're talking about, when you're cutting back and forth between the prison where we spend most of our time and then the kind of ISB investigation. There's really great examples that we'll talk about in the next episode that we cover, episode 9, of highlighting exactly this phenomenon of sociopathic people or psychopath kind of being allowed to operate because a totalitarian state, an oppressive regime, allows them to do so. The thing that really got me was the similarities that I felt between some of the prison scenes and Schindler's List, specifically when all the prisoners are sent to work, basically, slave labor, and they're doing a relatively monotonous task. And if the team who performs poorly every day is shocked using the non-lethal level of electricity, and that's just a part of everybody's day, one group of people is going to be shocked. And I was thinking of the scene from Schindler's List when, seemingly for fun, the Nazis take a slow working prisoner out into the yard and are going to shoot him, but then their guns jam. That's kind of what I was thinking of. So a little dark connection there, but I think that's kind of the point they're going for, showing the cruelty and the caprice of the Empire. And
the thing about Andor as well is the reward for having the best numbers in the day is just flavor.
My God. Yeah.
Taste.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine what that meal must taste like to drink from that tube or whatever it is. But yeah,
I mean, I wrote down kind of before they got into all the cruelty of the prison, love me a prison planet, because I'm thinking of Dune here, where we got I haven't read the book, which, okay, take back my nerd card, whatever, but maybe I'll read it at some point. I don't know. Have you read the Dune book?
I stopped at Heretics of Dune, which is number 4 or 5.
But you're familiar with the series then? Because there's a prison planet in the Dune Legendarium, which is used to source the Emperor's elite troops, the Sardaukar, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that in the Dune movie, the most recent release. So the prison planet is a feature of science fiction, science fantasy tropes. It's a trope, I guess. So it's always interesting to see what you can do, because the writers have a free rein to make it as awful, oppressive as possible. And I think they really accomplished that here with the floor and the monotonous work, but it's also visually really impressive. One thing I liked was when the transport ship is landing, you see these huge drains all around the perimeter of the prison structures in the water. And I think later on we learned that that's part of the power supply. It's a hydroelectric power generation, but it also is a really effective security measure. And if anybody jumps in the water, they're going to be sucked into this turbine and chopped to bits in the power turbines. So it's just it was really visually impressive. And then this is not the only installation on this planet. There are seemingly, I don't want to say dozens, but there were several other of these large prison structures. So overall, this, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people are imprisoned like this, working 12 hours a day, making widgets for the Death Star.
Yeah.
What else you got for this episode?
just Saw Gerrera.
Yeah.
He has been through. I mean, you've mentioned in the past that you haven't really followed the cartoons, the animated
I
Star
have
Wars
not.
stuff, but Saw Gerrera has been in Clone Wars, Rogue One. Like, there's so many different iterations of Saw Gerrera, and the lay fan who watches Andor and hasn't seen any of the animated besides his character in Rogue One, the movie, probably doesn't mean anything to him that Saw Gerrera is in this or referenced, but it's a pretty big deep cut for most fans that have followed all of the different materials. So it was nice to see him in here. And I think we talked in the last episode that each of the different rebel factions has their own reputation. And Saw Gerrera's is very much like a militant terrorist organization compared to what the rebellion is. And they kind of get to that point in Rogue One in the movie. Just interesting to see all of these different groups. It's called an alliance for a reason, working together and coordinating in like the birth of the rebellion that we're at right now. So just intriguing political stuff. We get all the stuff with Mon Mothma trying to find ways to move money around. Yeah, just great. Really, really good episode.
And to round out our discussion of episode 8, we do have some scenes with Cyril and Deidre. It's been discovered that Cyril is still hunting for Cassian. He's brought into ISBs, interrogated by Deidre, looking for anything left out of the original report about Ferrix. I think he does give some additional information. He's released, given a 2 thumbs up. But then later we get him waiting for Deidre in the walkway leading to ISB, slightly stalking. And then he's basically kind of half
light stalking.
Light stalking. There you go. That's a good way to put it. It's kind of a combination of, I want to be helpful, I really like what you're doing, and then
dominate me.
Yeah, he's kind of, he wants to be slapped around a little bit. With overbearing mother, you can see where it comes from. It's just how he accepts affection from women. But so we do have a continuing Cyril, and I don't think we've seen the last of him. And I am intrigued to see where we'll go. I originally said that he's going to end up joining the rebellion. I'm no longer holding that position, but he's not going away.
And one of the moments from this that I think is noteworthy, we have Cyril in that interrogation scene. He admits that the report that was filed about his incident from episodes 1 and 2, he wasn't even allowed to read. And I think they mentioned it at the beginning of the season as well, but he was just told to sign it. And it just shows that bureaucracy of how poorly the Empire is run, because everybody is so focused on their movement up the ladder that there's so many of these instances where maybe Andor is caught much sooner if this guy doesn't do this and force these people to sign this report or whatever it is about what happened. And it shows all of the different minutia of where can the rebellion operate, how can they be successful in fighting the Empire, and they give you all of these little different examples of how poorly the Empire is run. And it goes all the way back to episode 2, where Luthen says to Andor, "How did you steal this Starlink box," or whatever it's called? And he goes, I just walked in and took it. And they're so ignorant and arrogant. And it's all of these little different things that they give us as examples. And it's just great.
So this is a really salient point. And I'm glad that you brought this up, because it's going back to the comparison that we've drawn. And we're not the first people to do this. You mentioned that Star Wars, the Empire, was a lot of, especially the aesthetics, were really based on Nazi Germany. Like, famously, stormtroopers, right? Yeah. The terminology, everything. Famously, the Nazi Germany, there was a ton of infighting underneath the surface. Like, you had Hitler at the top, but that one of his strategies was to give people overlapping portfolios. So there was this constant kind of shuffling, and sometimes it got violent. But like, the way that they do that is, again, really good, because it's not about. And I said this before, I like seeing people who are really good at their job, such as people like Daedra and the communications person who kind of uncovered the heist, not in time to stop it, but nonetheless. But overall, you get a sense that it is still a bureaucracy. And something as simple as, if they actually cared to find criminals, they would check ID or do some sort of like DNA testing. They don't actually care. They just want to fill the prisons with slave labor, basically. So they're not trying to pursue justice necessarily. They are about furthering the interest of the empire, which maybe, again, going back to this Cyril seems to be a little bit of an idealist when it comes to order and justice.
What the empire is.
Yeah. So maybe, and I haven't seen the final 2 episodes of this season. We don't know what's in store for the next season.
Are you saying maybe
I'm going to come back to my prediction? Yeah, maybe I'll still be proven right, and that he'll get disenchanted with the empire and seek a different way to pursue justice. But yeah, this is something that the movies could never do a good job of, just given the constraints of theatrical release, of these little details of building, of showing how the empire is. I used caprice earlier. It's capricious. It is cruel. It is totalitarian, but it's also kind of just bad. Like what you make up for in, or what you lack in effectiveness, you make up for in cruelty. And, when the movies just get around it by, the guy's evil, they're hunting the people that we like. And we kind of get it. We don't need a ton of details. And I guess episode 9 is really going to lead into a little bit more of that. So do you want to go ahead and transition our discussion and summarize episode 9 for our viewers?
Episode 9 is titled Nobody's Listening. Deidre Miro and an Imperial scientist named Dr. Gorst torture Bix for information and realize that Cassian may have been involved in the Aldani attack. They fail to learn anything from Bix about Luthen. The ISB capture a rebel pilot from Krieger's group, who reveals that a power station on Spellhouse is set to be raided. Mon Mothma reunites with Vel, revealed as her cousin, and encourages her to keep a low profile while maintaining the facade of a rich and politically uninvolved young woman. Mon and Take Kalma continue working to covertly gather funds for rebel activities. Meanwhile, an older member of Cassian's prison work crew named Olaf is euthanized by a prison medic named Dr. Rassiv when he suffers a stroke and can no longer work effectively. Dr. Rassiv confirms to Cassian and floor manager Kino Loy a disturbing rumor. A prisoner who had completed his sentence was sent to work on a different level instead of being released, forcing the prison to kill all the prisoners on that level to cover up the mistake. Cassian and Kino realize that the prison will never let them go, convincing Kino to join Cassian's scheme to escape. Now, this episode had a whole shit ton of things happen, and that revelation that you're not getting out, I mean, that would convince any prison group to riot and try to escape. Yeah. And especially when you have all of these instances of their sentences being like raised for no reason.
Yep.
And then even when you do finish, you're just going to get transferred either to another prison or to a different floor. And the one thing that I'm very good at suspending disbelief and just taking the show for what it is. But when we had 2 guys on different levels in those tubes with the glass talking to each other through hand motions, how did they coordinate that to know what they're saying?
Yeah,
that's the one where I was like, how are they gathering so much information from people just doing little motions with their hands?
You do get Kino saying, it takes a week to get information up from level 2. So there's a little bit of service to that idea. But I could see it as the sign language has been passed down from prisoners who've been there for a while to the newer arrivals who kind of want to get in on the communication. I could see that as an artifact of prison life. I've been inside of several prisons before. I've done it for work. Never been in longer than just a couple of hours. But it's a very different way of living, and it doesn't take too long to adapt to that from what I understand and what I have observed. So you could see kind of the sign language quickly being disseminated among arrivals. Plus, and they do a good job of showing like something happened on 2, but they don't exactly know what it was, right? And only later does the doctor, who is seemingly there or had first or secondhand direct knowledge, confirm it, right? Which, like, that whole scene was just so, and this goes to our discussion about how the Empire isn't actually that good, right? Like, did they make a mistake and send that guy to a different level, or do they just not care enough to actually release him? Again, it's not about rehabilitation. It's not about paying back a debt to society. It's about squeezing slave labor from these people. And we can kill 100 of them, because guess what? We're going to round up, like you said, all of everybody else's sentence has been doubled, and we're going to round up a bunch more people to fill out the prisons. So yeah, really great illustration of the cruelty and the capriciousness of the Empire. What does the doctor say? Like, we'll all want what he's getting by the end, or like he's taking like the easy way out or something like that. Yeah,
he's got the easy way out because he had a stroke. Yeah. And I just felt so bad because didn't they say, like, the whole point of that old guy was that he was like 20 shifts away or something.
Yeah.
And he had been there for like hundreds of shifts. And yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's the thing too. Like, that's what gets Kino on board with the escape, is his whole thing has been getting this guy to the end, getting him out, and then he's not going to get out. And then they realize how bad everything is. And I think the old guy's death is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, even if the 100 people killed on level 2, I don't think that would have been enough for Kino to switch. But when this guy who's been following the rules, putting in the time, doesn't make it, I think that's what finally has him snap.
I wrote down old man equals Shawshank.
Yeah.
Like the old guy in Shawshank Redemption, right? Who actually did release, but then like he had been institutionalized, couldn't make it on the outside, and ended up committing suicide. And I think that is what kind of triggered Morgan Freeman's character to realize, like, I got to get out and actually, kind of do something. And I'm caught in between. I don't want to say that as in, because obviously it's not the same thing that happened here, but they do a really good job of taking things that are familiar and then adapting them in the context of the show, right? Like it is a heist is not a new thing. There's tons of movies about heists, right? But they do it in a way that's unique to Star Wars, and it's grounded in the reality of the universe, right? There's not a bunch of unbelievable, they're not using the Force to levitate the payroll stuff onto it's people pushing carts of stuff. This prison, everything is straightforward. Like, the floors are electrified. The food comes through the tubes, right? The hand signals are the only way of communicating, and it takes a long time, and you get incomplete information. So they do a really good job of kind of taking these things that have existed in other media, putting them together in a way where there's an emotional connection. It's believable in most cases for a fantasy show. And it's like, you can see the anguish that Kino is going through. Like, and I think Andor is doing a really good job, and it comes to its culmination in episode 10 of like working on Kino, of like, how many guards per floor. He keeps like, that's like, and when he finally gets his answer is when shit's about to happen.
Yeah.
And you kind of, you see, and I mentioned this before we started recording, is like the conflict, but in Kino, every time we had like a close up of Andy Serkis, I kept seeing Smeagol and Gollum. I was like, oh, he's having an inner monologue.
Just those facial expressions. Yeah. And they are also doing a really good job of making the show feel real. They're making Star Wars feel real.
Yes.
We have 2 characters now in pretty recent episodes. One died of a heart attack and one died of a stroke from being overworked. So seeing like real world instances, I think, to me, just helps develop that sense of believability. And when you're watching the show, you have a much stronger connection to it because you're seeing things that can actually happen.
Yeah.
And I love Star Wars without the laser swords, because they do it when it's done right. And I think this Andor is really, really doing it right. Mandalorian did it really, really well for the first 2 seasons without, blasters use kyber crystals, but it's like it's a gun. So
Yeah.
it's not like this. Anybody can use a gun. Not everybody can use a lightsaber.
Well,
So
like, lightsabers were great when two people had them. And it was like, it's a mystical tool of the Jedi Order. And the only reason that Darth Vader had one is because he used to be a Jedi, right? And then I think you only ever see two lightsabers at a time in the entire original series, right? There's a duel in each movie. I guess Luke uses it at the beginning. Luke uses it now and then, but you get the sense that he's just a kid using a sword, and nobody knows how to deal with it, and so there's no challenge. But then in the prequel series, there's fucking lightsabers all over the place, and they become so standard to see lightsabers that it loses its cool factor. But here, yeah, you don't have that, right? People have to improvise. They have to get, I mean, we see this in the subsequent prison break in the following episode. Like, sometimes you don't have a laser sword. Sometimes you got to use a wrench.
Yeah, it's no legit. I mean, there's different medium where a large amount of lightsabers is okay. Have you read any of the High Republic books?
No, and I think it's like, for me, I know about the Old Republic and the High Republic the same thing.
I don't think so.
No, like, okay, but I know in the deep history of Star Wars, there were many more Jedi, but there was also the entire Sith Empire, and like, but it was always like kind of, it was okay because it happened in the far past, and similar to much fantasy, there's this like degradation where it makes sense that at the further along you go, the fewer lightsabers there are, the fewer wielders of the Force there are, because over time these things kind of fall apart.
Well, if you get a chance, and if any of the listeners get a chance to read the High Republic books, they are phenomenal. And I mean, yes, they're probably classified as YA, young adult, but the story is great. The lore behind the Force and the Jedi and the Sith, and I mean, in one of the books, the main groups of bad guys are just pirates. And it's so good. And I think they've released like 6 books in the series now. But yeah, I listened to them on audiobook. Phenomenal. Good books.
All right. There's some other things in episode 9. You mentioned the interrogation with Bix. And we get to see ISB at work, Dedra and her kind of cronies. And you get more of this cruelty. They end up, is it in this episode where they hang Pack, the guy who was kind of overseeing the radio?
Yeah, because in episode 8, we see his son asking, "Where's my dad?" And that's when Bix initially gets arrested.
Yeah. Because
his dad has been like taken in the middle of the night, like he never came home and was just arrested without a warrant, cause, anything like that. But yeah.
And we see, and part of Bix's interrogation is being subjected to the screams of children who have been killed by the Empire.
And I missed that the first watch through. And then I rewatched it with Carly and I caught that and I was like, holy fuck. Like, to just have headphones on where you're constantly listening to the screams of children be killed. Like, and what do they say? He says something like the language of this planet. Yeah, there's like it has like a some sort of psychological effect on you where it like renders you more likely to, it just messes you up. It's like so traumatizing. It's like a truth serum, basically. Or is it, right? Are you just going to get somebody who's going to say anything to make it end? It's the like, does torture work? Generally speaking, no. People are going to say what they need to end it, and it's usually not going to be truthful. But they said that they don't really get much information out of Bix, do they? No, they say they don't get anything about Luthen, but I don't think she knows very much about Luthen. No, I mean, Luthen's good. He's good at his job. That whole relationship has been, I mean, that's the reason he's not worried about killing Bix. He's worried about killing Andor because Andor has been on his ship, the Fondor. He knows his name. Like, he knows all of these different things. So that's a good point. So those are the reasons that they want to kill Andor. Right? No loose ends. But here's the thing. Luthen was obviously impressed by Cassian Andor's abilities. He recruited him for the Aldhani mission. The Aldhani mission was successful in part because of Cassian's participation.
yes, he was paid to partake in that mission, but why would you? It seems like Luthen really went out on a limb.
He did.
He knows that Cassian is at least seemingly motivated to resist the Empire. I don't know why he's decided to kill him. I don't know why the decision to tie up the loose ends outweighs rather the value of having an asset as skilled as Cassian.
Because up to this point, only two people know of Luthen and his identity: Vel and his personal assistant who works with him at the antique shop.
Yeah.
So just those two. And I think to him at this point, he knows the Empire is on to Cassian. Cassian can tie him to everything. And the cons outweigh the pros. At this point, it'd be better to get rid of Cassian. He can find somebody else to do the jobs. And yeah, he knows too much, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I completely understand, right? I think Luthen is not afraid to do what has to be done to protect himself. I just, I like Cassian. Why doesn't he like Cassian? Why doesn't he want to keep him around? Get rid of Vel. There was a scene in this episode where Cinta and Vel are on Ferrix, and they're having they're having a conversation, and I get the sense that Cinta is a true believer in the rebellion, and Vel seems to be more interested romantically, emotionally, more attached to Cinta than to the rebellion, at least in their conversation, where Cinta is all about, we're here for a purpose. We got to track down Andor, and Vel, I think there's some remark around I think Cinta says they wouldn't rent to two people, or it wouldn't make sense for us to stay together or something like that. And kind of rebuffing Vel, being no, the mission is more important. This isn't a vacation for us to just hang out together.
Mm-hmm. No, that's the vibe I got too. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if that's going anywhere or not, but
I mean, it's clearly it was somewhere, I think, is what we're led to believe. And yeah, I mean, that's the way I interpreted it. It's Cinta is much more invested in the rebellion, and Vel, not to say that she's not invested in the rebellion, but she's also pursuing a romantic
she's trying to get some strange on the side.
Yeah.
We get it.
And I think Cinta would be okay with not having a relationship and being only about the rebellion. And I think Vel would rather have a relationship and then forsake the rebellion.
Yeah, I see that too.
But it could be 60-40, 40-60 each way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We do get a scene with Mon Mothma and is it Davo or Davo Skolden? Davo, and not to be confused with the American college football coach, Dabo Sweeney. And I wrote down, they always get you on tax fraud. And I feel like they're going so far out of their way to demonstrate the complicated nature of all this money transfer. And I feel like they're going to get a knock on the door from the Imperial IRS. And then it's going to be Al Capone goes to prison for tax fraud, not for being a gangster type thing. That's just the vibe I get. I don't know where we're going with that, but that is what's happening. And then I wrote down too, good names. This show does a really good job in coming up with good names. Star Wars names. They're close enough to a contemporary American English name where it's not outlandish. A lot of George Lucas's names were fucking nutso. These are
Tay Kolma. That's one of the names of this in the show.
Yeah, Andor. That's good. Davo Skolden. Yeah, Davo Skolden. Okay, yeah.
Except for Tim.
With two M's, though. It had two M's,
right? That's where I'm just all right, Tim. Though,
well, he got killed, right? That's what happened. You have a boring enough name, you're going to get shot by a corpo.
Look out, Cyril and Daedra. Except they're Empire. I feel like the Empire tends to have more sinister, traditionally English names, Britain names, and then they just
Well, there's the head of the ISB is Wolf Yularen, right? That's a little weird.
It is Yularen,
yeah. But either way, no, this series does a good job with names. I think that's all we got for episode 9. Shall we move on to episode 10?
Let's do 10.
All right. Episode 10 is titled One Way Out By breaking a water pipe and flooding his work floor, Cassian disables the floor's security system, allowing work crews there to overpower the few guards and escape. Kino uses the prison's intercom system to encourage other floors to escape, and the rebellion sweeps through the entire prison. Despite his role in the escape, Kino reveals that he can't swim. Cassian swims with the other escapees and reaches land. Mon Mothma meets with Davos Skolden, a shady businessman who offers to help finance her projects. But Mon refuses after Davo requests that Mon arrange a meeting between her daughter and his son, an initial step towards marriage in their Chandrilan culture. ISB supervisor Lonnie Jung, secretly a rebel informant, meets with Luthen and updates him on ISB activities. The two men reflect on how they are both trapped in their roles.
Dude, that I told you when we started doing Andor that this scene between Luthen and this ISB agent is the best part for me, in my opinion, of the entire series. Because you have when he comes off the elevator, we're led to believe that the rebellion is full of good people, like good guys. They're the good guys. Let's root for them. And this guy steps off the elevator. I think it's actually before when he's got the earpiece in and he's talking to Luthen. And Luthen says something along the lines of, "Congratulations on the new baby," or the new daughter or something.
Yeah.
Like such a fucking villainous thing to say to somebody. Like, let me just remind you of how much I know about you and how under my thumb you are. And then the conversation that they have, you have the ISB agent saying, "I can't do this anymore. I'm in the middle of the shit every day. I'm like surrounded by wolves and I'm the sheep," like all of this stuff. And then Stellan Skarsgård's monologue as Luthen is poetic. It's dark. It reveals all of up to this point, at the beginning, you kind of like Luthen, and then Luthen wants to kill Andor, the protagonist of the show, and he reveals himself to be this dark guy. But then this monologue shows all of the different minutia of what and who his character is. He has something along the lines of, "I fight for a sunrise I know I'll never see." And like all of these different aspects of his character that he's willing to commit acts and do things that will degrade his character, but he knows it's for the greater good. And in the way they leave off that episode with that monologue, I was like, oh my God, this show is so fucking good.
Yeah. I mean, there is more human pathos in that moment than in, I hate to say it, like any other, the entire 3 sequel trilogy movies combined. It is more interesting than much of what happens in those other movies. And it's just 2 guys talking. Mm-hmm. It's really one guy talking to another guy. And from a cinematography standpoint, it's so good because it's dark, it's windy, it's grimy. You get a sense of like
he's got to he goes down like it's Coruscant. So like it's a planet that's a giant city. And the route he takes to get to the meeting location, I feel like that elevator is probably like 1,000 years old, and he goes down to a floor that hasn't seen sun in like 20,000 years.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned some of the books, the young adult novels for the High Republic series. I remember my dad got into reading Star Wars books, and he read one about, this was when Han Solo's backstory was still a little unclear. Where he was a kind of an orphan who grew up on Coruscant, and part of his adventure is going down into the belly of Coruscant, where sunlight hasn't reached in thousands of years, and there are mutant creatures down there, and it really is a whole different world than the flying cars. And it's so great that we have 2 uncomfortable conversations in this episode. We've got we do. We have the Mon Mothma conversation with Davos Skolden in this beautiful, I mean, they're constantly remarking on the view and how great it is to visit Coruscant, right? And it's sunny and bright, and they're surrounded in this opulent apartment. And then you've got this basically like pulp noir setting, and that's really what it is. It's so well done, and it shows the various underbellies, right? And each of these conversations are with kind of shady characters.
Yeah. And Luthen is like standing on a bridge with no rails, just with the wind blowing him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, where's the wind coming from? He's like standing in the depths of this city. Like,
Hey,
oh God,
it's so this is not in this episode, but in the prior episode, I think when Luthen is talking with Saw Gerrera, they're kind of going about what do they want, right? And they're talking about, is it democracy? I think I think Luthen accuses Saw of wanting anarchy, basically, and that kind of fits his, he's very
terrorist.
He's the
terrorist
kind of
agenda.
Terrorist willing to be violent, which we see a lot of, or we see more of in Rogue One. But Saw asks Luthen, "What are you?" And Luthen says, "I'm a coward." And before we were recording, we were talking about how that could be interpreted. At least I interpreted it as potential evidence of the theory that he's a Jedi, which you mentioned, I think, in episode 1 or 2, when Luthen's first appearance, whenever he first showed up.
Yeah, I think it was our second episode covering Andor, because I talked about the kyber crystal and his staff kind of looks like a lightsaber. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's still so much mystery about Luthen, but you do get the sense that he described himself as a coward. I interpreted that as, if he was a Jedi, it's because all of his friends and colleagues were murdered and executed and hunted down, and he survived. He didn't go and fight. He didn't try to stick up for the Jedi Order. He hid, but he survived. And now he doesn't act out in the open, right? He manipulates people. He sacrifices people. He has to be ruthless. You mentioned, and he's fighting for a sunrise that he'll never see. So he doesn't really have hope, yet he continues on. And my thinking is, what drives that, right? What is it about him? He's not an idealist necessarily. Is this revenge for the Jedi? Is this, we don't know yet. At least I don't know yet. Maybe the next 2 episodes will reveal it, but you can tell that he's a complicated character. Could be a Jedi, but could easily also be kind of like, I don't know if like anti-hero is the right way. Like, he's not really a Han Solo character. I don't know. He's almost he's not the villain, but he's, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe a type of anti-hero. Like he like you said, he wants to kill the main character.
He's a very fluid character, which is so intriguing to me. Like, I came away from season 1 of Andor, Luthen and Kino Loy were my 2 favorite characters in this entire series. And we leave off, we have Luthen where we leave off in the episode we're currently talking about. And we have Kino Loy, who can't get off the prison floating barge because he can't swim. And I guess for me, it's just the acting was so good between Andy Serkis and Stellan Skarsgård that I'm like, yeah, I'll buy into whatever you want to tell me. And whatever this character is, the fact that neither of them were up for Emmys for Andor is insane to me. Because to me, it was some of the best acting in television in the year. So
yeah. I think Skarsgård has more screen time.
I guess, yeah,
in the show,
three episodes for Andy Serkis is kind of tough to justify, but
you could still get a supporting actor nod. I don't know. That seems astonishing to me. Hopefully they'll be recognized otherwise, but this is a good switch over to the prison break, which is the meat of this episode. What did you think of the mechanics of the prison break itself?
I thought it was genius, because when it started, we had the scenes of Cassian going to the bathroom and like chipping away at the wall or at that pipe. And at first I was like, what the hell? Like, what part of the plan is this? And then when they have the guy lowering down to bring the new person on, and then Cassian goes and breaks the pipe and it short circuits the floor, I was like, oh, fucking genius. Like, what great thinking to come up with a workaround about these electrified floors. And I was bummed that people are going to die because the guys up top have guns and you got to climb up to the high ground. High ground's important in Star Wars. And the one like friendly prisoner, the redhead guy.
Oh yeah.
When he gets shot, I was like, oh, that's a bummer. Cause I liked him But yeah, great plan. Like, it made sense for the situation they were in. And then when you have 50 guys against 2 guys with guns, clearly, eventually, the 50 guys are going to get up and like overtake them.
Yeah, especially when the guys are being pelted with wrenches and chunks of metal and stuff like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was great. Like, I loved it. And then from there, you get into the rest of the prison doesn't really know anything's happening yet. And then they get to the command room. And that moment between Cassian and Kino, where Kino's kind of like hesitant to take the mic, and Cassian says, "It's got to be from you. You've got to tell them what to do." And just the Kino, his voice going over the entire complex, cutting to the workers currently working, and then cutting to prison guards who are fucking terrified, listening to a prisoner over the speaker system, was just cinematography goals. It was so good. And then, yeah, from there, it's just a free-for-all. Everybody getting out. You see prison guards kind of cowering in rooms, trying to hide from everybody getting out. And all of this goes back to the first episode of the prison series, in episode 8. When Cassian is first being loaded onto the floor, we hear a conversation between 2 guards, and one goes, "Hey, where's this guy? We need him here so we can bring someone down." And the guy goes, "Sorry, we're short-staffed.
Yep.
I had to come up from level 6 or whatever. Let's do this. Let's get it going."
Yep.
So that's like the seed that's dropped, where Cassian's like, "Oh, how many guards are there on each floor?"
Well, even the episode 9 is titled "Nobody's Listening," which is a direct quote from Cassian. It's like they don't have enough people to monitor us.
Mm-hmm.
They're not listening to our conversations. They're similar to his thesis about how easy it is to steal the Starpath unit. They think that the floor is going to be enough to deter them, right? They think that the incentive of being, of getting flavor in your food and the disincentive of being shocked at the end of the day is enough to get compliance. And but that's not enough when you have a figure like Cassian, who is both intelligent enough to notice these things, put them together, and can inspire the right people. And I think that was, to me, one of the coolest scenes was Cassian's inspiration of Kino specifically. You see Kino is kind of torn between, it's the death of Olaf, right? But then it's like Kino is probably not smart enough to plan out the escape himself, but he has necessary information, and he needs Cassian is the key to it, where he comes in and he's a singular figure who can inspire the right people, who can get the mechanics of the escape to actually work, and has the daring to do it, right? Mm-hmm. He busted the pipe. I think he kills both of the guards, right? Like
one of them for sure.
Yeah. And like he ices them. So everybody did their part in that escape, right? But it doesn't happen without Cassian. Now, question for you. Do you kill the guards in the control room? There were 3. They killed the one lead guy, but there were 2 other ones. Do you kill those 2?
I mean, that just depends on what your moral compass is, because one of the 2 remaining did exactly what they wanted him to do. And then you get into the whole debate of, is the rebellion the Empire? What makes us different than them? I think this is that moment of Cassian showing that he's not the Empire, that he's not going to do the evil thing and kill them regardless. Yeah.
Okay. So you don't kill the 2 guards in the control room.
I'm not saying I don't, but I'm justifying why they didn't.
Yeah. My thinking is that those 2 guys are probably going to be dead, right? Like, I think I wrote down, like, there's no way that all the guards on their particular prison are probably marked off as dead. Like,
well, think about it.
They're going to track them down, right? How badly are they outnumbered?
Well,
right?
After the heist, I'm saying the Empire is probably going to kill the guards.
Oh, yeah. Well, that too.
So
yeah.
Think, if we go back to the heist, everybody who was stationed at Aldhani was removed, and that was just money. So think about allowing your group of prisoners to overtake your compound and escape, and you're cowering in offices, not doing anything to stop them. I'm sure the Empire was ruthless to the people who weren't killed by the prisoners.
So one of the really sad parts of the whole escape is the very end where they have to jump into the water and then swim to land in order to actually complete the escape. That's the one way out. But Kino can't swim. And you have to think he knew that the entire time, right? He was the one who said one way out. He knew that it would involve swimming at some point, but he did it anyway, because knowing that he probably was not going to be able to take that final leap. So that takes courage on his part, sacrifice on his part, beyond just the risk of harm and death that he encountered during the actual escape. So that was a pretty heartbreaking. It was very touching.
Yeah, there's a part of me that thinks he doesn't know that it's in the middle of the ocean, because well, I guess I have to really focus and rewatch.
On when like the entry scene, like, do they out the windows of the shuttle see the?
Are they able to see the water? Yeah,
I think they are. I think we kind of see it from Cassian's viewpoint.
And I think you're right, because the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, he got to the end and then realized that it was water and he couldn't swim. But yeah, just it adds so much more depth when you know that he's doing it for everybody else and he knows he can't escape. Yeah, it just makes it so much better.
And I guess and I was kind of thinking like, okay, you gotta kill the guards in the control room and then, request a shuttle or something like that, or figure out when the next troop or prisoner drop off is going to be and hijack that shuttle. And then you can get off planet. But, that's probably a little bit too much. It's much more dramatic and effective to have the escape go the way it does. But I got to say, they're making all those widgets for we can assume Death Star. I'll give credit where credit is due. Haley said, are they making those for the Death Star before I did? So she was very intent about making sure everybody knew that. Now that isn't confirmed, but that's our suspicion.
That's your guess number 7.
That's sure. The little widgets are for the Death Stars is my next prediction.
See, I remember thinking they look like fidget spinners.
They do look like fidget spinners. Yeah. Galactic fidget spinners. But you got to think they got to get those off this planet, right? Maybe hide in a shipment of fidget spinners. That could be the other way out. But that would be, I think it doesn't make sense from a dramatic standpoint, right?
And they leave it open-ended.
That's true.
Kino Loy could have gotten off. We don't know. They leave you to assume that at this point he is still on the prison island.
Yeah. And then there's a little snippets from the other parts of the kind of the universe of Andor here. So we have a scene on Ferrix where some of the residents are concerned about Marva. And I think I wrote down Marva wants to die. Like she stopped eating or she stopped taking her medications. Like she's kind of...
Wasn't the whole thing that she fell? And
Did she fall? Hey, sorry. I was repeating what you said.
Yeah, so that whole scene between Bix and Cassian's friend and Marva was she was underneath the hotel, or she was near a gate to like
an old tunnel to the hotel, like a sewage tunnel or like a garbage tunnel or something,
and was trying to see if the tunnel was still accessible for when the rebellion was ready to attack the hotel that is now occupied as like HQ of the ISB.
Yeah, because Marva said like, I'm going to stay here and fight. Right? She like Marva. I mean, it was one of those things too, where it was kind of implied like, I'm going to fight to the death. She's she's lived her life. She's going to go out swinging.
No more running.
Yeah.
And so she apparently falls and hurts herself. I mean, old people fall, and then that's
it.
Turns out that's pretty fucking bad for an old person if they fall.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Like, I never really thought about it. Like, I used to laugh at the help I fallen and I can't get up commercials.
Oh, the life alert.
The life alert stuff. But now I'm like, God damn, go save that lady. Like,
yeah. She
fell. She can't get up. Somebody get there. Yeah. So that happens. And then they cut to her and she's like barely drinking water. And so it's looking pretty rough for Marva. And you even have Bix and Cassian's friend trying to get a hold of Cassian to let him know that his mother isn't doing well. And that's how
that's the whole connection to Luthen.
Yeah, that's how Luthen figures out that, hey, something might be going down on Ferrix. That's how we might be able to catch Cassian.
And that's how the Empire caught Bix and the guy who runs the shop where the radio's hidden, right? It was that transmission that they tracked back to that shop, got Bix, got the guy's going to die. Bix was tortured. So like some pretty bad shit happened because they were just trying to let Cassian know that his adopted mom is dying.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other scene, which we mentioned in the summary and kind of in comparison to the Luthen conversation, is this somewhat veiled conversation between Mon Mothma and Davil Skolden, this shady businessman. The big takeaway here is that he will help her do what she wants to do, moving money around. He doesn't charge a fee that she wants to pay. She doesn't want to be indebted with a favor. She would rather pay a little bit of money to him and not have to, do any kind of future deals or owe him a favor. But he insists on this meeting ostensibly to set up a marriage between their teenage children. And I wrote down that teenage marriage is just a little weird because she's 13. I think the daughter is supposed to be 13, and I get it. It's part of the Chandlerland culture, but it was just a little bit of an ick factor for me. But I understand it's part of the setting of the show, the building of the Chandlerland culture, and I doubt that we're going to see a teenage marriage awkward scene. I hope we don't.
Well, I hope we do. Just to creep you up.
Great. Okay. Well, we've lost half our audience, and now we're flagged by the FBI. Yeah, but so it's hard to believe that we are 10 episodes into the show. I wish this were a 20 episode season because every episode is great. All of the plot lines are interesting. The characters are compelling. I completely disavow my opinion from episode 1. I
am so happy that we're doing this podcast so I can go back and listen to your episode 1 reactions.
Oh God. All right. Well, again, it was a mistake to watch one episode of the show.
Yeah. We should have definitely done 3 at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. And because you're right, like they are chunked into these discrete arcs. There's the prison arc, the heist arc. We're going to watch 11 and 12 together. You're saying like it's one story told in 2 episodes.
Yeah. In our defense, it would have been like 2 episodes, then a group of 3, and then 2. So did we kind of organize it poorly? Yeah. But I think the way we're leaving off with this, it's basically a 2-part finale.
Yeah.
I think, it's going to be a great episode next week. I'm super excited to talk about just this phenomenal 2-part ending to this season. I know Haley's kind of itching to watch forward.
Yeah, she wanted it. She wanted us to record this podcast earlier than we did so we could watch some more over the weekend, but that did not happen. So I've done a bad job of tracking all my predictions, and we should probably wrap this up. But let's see. Cyril joins the rebellion. I'm going to stand by that.
That's still TBD.
I made it. Yep, TBD. Mon Mothma's husband either dead or they divorce. Still could happen.
TBD.
Nemec dead or Nemec dies. That was correct.
No, you were wrong.
I was half right. I was half right.
He survived the heist.
Suffered a fatal injury during the heist.
But survived the heist.
We don't know actually when the time of death was. He could have been dead on the operating table. Could have been dead when they got there.
No, because he was able to guide them out of the eye. And once they got out of the eye, they were safe.
No, the goods weren't delivered to their ultimate destination. So part of the heist is, delivering. Harlow equals Andy Serkis. That's wrong. Vel arranges for Cassian to be shivved in prison. That didn't happen. So, my predictions are not looking very good here. Let's see. Stuff that's upcoming. Geez, let's make a prediction for the final 2 episodes. Cassian is not going to find his sister. We haven't even heard about his sister, the whole impetus for episode 1.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to find her before the season's over. Maybe he'll get a clue about where she is in the final 2 episodes. I don't think Vel is going to make it. I think Vel is going to either die or be compromised, arrested by the Empire. And let's see. I predicted Olaf is going to die before he did, but that was easy. That was being phoned in. I don't really have any other predictions, but no, part of this is I'm happy to go along with the flow. I don't want to get overly into it, right? I mentioned this earlier. They're doing things that are familiar, but they're not using tropes. It's not super predictable. It's not like the things that happen that I wanted to see make sense in their context, right? It's not fan service. So I don't need to it's not a corny show that where you're going to make a bunch of predictions and like 10 things that I predict are going to happen in the series. This was just me kind of having fun with what I was seeing initially.
Well, and dare I say, thankfully your predictions are wrong, because this would have been a terrible show.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God. We should come up with like how do you make Andor a terrible show? Here are all the things that you need to do.
Let Sam Marvin be your showrunner.
Let's see. Cyril and Dedra get together, and it's a double wedding between them and Mon Mothma's kid. Let's see here. Everybody's a secret Jedi. Yoda is...
Well, I still do hope that Luthen is a secret Jedi.
I mean, it could be cool. Here's the thing. He could be a secret Jedi, and it just doesn't matter. Right? Like him
exactly,
being, like he knows that being outed as a Jedi could be a death sentence. Like he can deal with the ISB. What he can't deal with is Darth Vader.
Well, right? And think about that. Like this is
the Force to come out and find him.
This is where all of this stuff is tying together. Like in Obi-Wan, say what you will about the series of Obi-Wan, but the whole concept of him tuning himself out from the Force and not being able to talk to Qui-Gon, not using the Force. So then when he finally fights Vader, he gets his ass kicked. Spoilers for Obi-Wan. But that whole concept of a Jedi having to sever ties to the Force and live life like a normal person would be amazing if that's what happens with Luthen. Like I would be so excited if that's the case.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this
is Elves Rings. This is Elves Rings and Nerdy Things. You can follow us on Facebook. You can email us at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. We have a new episodes every week, Wednesday mornings, super early at like 3 fucking a.m. if you live on the West Coast. That's because of Sam. You can write hate mail to him if you want us to move the release times up earlier.
Who's getting their podcast release alerts so loud that it wakes them up at 3 a.m.?
Me.
Do not disturb mode, man. Do not disturb mode.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's us. And we have one more episode of Andor next week where we will cover the 2-part season finale. And then I don't know what we're going to do. I'll be in Michigan for Memorial Day. We might do an episode there. We might not. We might take a week off. I don't know. It's going to be
a week off. It's the holiday week. You're traveling cross country.
2 days of... It's a whirlwind trip to Michigan from all the way out here in the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, maybe we take a week off.
You have a niece and a nephew to meet. 2 people who did not exist
last time I was in Michigan. Yeah.
So here we go.
But I'm more excited to swing by Yesterdog and get a hot dog.
There we go, people. You heard it here first. Yesterdog, more important than my daughter and our nephew.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.